The Amalfi breeze smelled of lilies and $1,500,000 champagne, a perfect symphony for a perfect wedding. Then, a sudden silence fell from the head table. William, the chairman of the International Banking Union and father of the groom, rose to his feet. He moved with a quiet purpose that commanded the attention of the entire room, his gaze locked directly onto me. Sitting at the small, gray tech table in the back, I watched him walk past the radiant bride and groom. He stopped right in front of me, his heels clicked together, echoing in the dead air. He rendered a military salute so sharp, so precise, it was a work of art. His voice, trained to command, rang with absolute clarity. "Ma'am, it is an honor to stand in your presence." I offered only a short, professional nod. Protocol, as the chairman held that salute, an unshakable statue of respect. I watched my sister Emily's world shatter, her flawless practice smile dissolved into a mask of disbelief. My parents' faces were a masterpiece of confusion twisting into dawning horror. They were finally witnessing a rank they couldn't ignore. Have you ever felt like the invisible one in your own family? Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. I didn't cry, I didn't ask why. When I rubbed my eyes trying to summon regret, there was only clarity. This wasn't a breakdown, it was a balance sheet. To understand the salute that broke my family, you have to look back 24 hours to the rehearsal dinner. The air in the villa was heavy with manufactured joy. My sister, Emily, the family's radiant golden child, was soaking up every ounce of adoration. She was marrying Tyler, a vice president at the world's largest investment bank, the absolute pinnacle of our parents' social climbing ambitions. I was doing my best to remain inconspicuous when Emily swooped in. Her laughter was a beautiful, brittle thing. She turned an icy smile on me, her voice loud enough for every VIP at the table to hear. "Victoria, the Wi-Fi in the West Wing is lagging again," she sneered. She didn't offer me a glass of wine, she offered me a job. "Go put on that gray technician uniform you brought. You're better with cables than conversation anyway." Sarah does paperwork, very important spreadsheets, I'm sure. "Make yourself useful for once." My mother, Amanda, didn't even look up from her silk napkins. My father, John, simply nodded his approval. They had spent years branding me as the mouse, the shy, quiet daughter lost in a world of screens. They thought the lock on my teenage bedroom door was because I was an introvert. They had no idea it was the first security protocol I ever established. I didn't argue, I didn't make a scene, I simply apologized to the table and returned to the quiet solitude of the villa's server room. The door clicked shut behind me. In the sterile, humming silence, I waited for the familiar sting of tears or the hot flush of anger. They never came. Instead, deep, cold clarity washed over me. I'd been the silent investor in their version of family for 10 years, footing the emotional bill while they overdraft my compassion. Tonight, the subscription expired. Perception is a critical layer of security, and Emily had just publicly labeled me as an irrelevant clerk in front of people I couldn't afford to have seeing me that way. She had created a breach in my operational security. I opened my laptop. Anger wasn't loud this time. It was clinical. I bypassed the villa's guest network and accessed the primary node of the global payment gateway. I looked at the accounts: John's construction firm, Emily's PR agency, Amanda's lifestyle fund. They were all linked to credit lines I had personally secured and monitored. I initiated a hard reset. I didn't just cut the Wi-Fi, I severed the financial artery of their vanity. In 60 seconds, I revoked the authorization for every single black credit card in my father's wallet. I watched the encrypted data streams flicker and die. I sat there in the dark, the hallway smelling like ozone and burnt expectations. For years, they had taken my silence for granted. They thought I was small because I was quiet. They didn't realize that in the world of high-stakes finance, the quietest voice often holds the most power. I hit the final key. Done. The laptop glowed with a different kind of sunrise, the kind made of facts, numbers, and quiet retribution. I walked back into the hall, my expression calm, factual, and lethal. Emily was trying to order another round of $500 scotch for the bridesmaids. She swiped her card. Denied. She tried another. Denied. The look of confusion on her face was priceless. She looked at me, her eyes darting with suspicion. I just adjusted my glasses. "Network issues," I said calmly. "It's amazing how fast things fail when you don't value the foundation." To the world on this island, I am a tech girl in a gray jumpsuit. To the system that moves $7 trillion across borders every single day, I am Valkyrie. My family thinks I do paperwork. They think I stare at spreadsheets until my eyes bleed because I have no other options. The reality is that I live in a world of high-frequency data streams and encrypted defensive perimeters. I connect dots that move markets. I see the threats before the CEOs do. My reports don't go to a middle Manager, they go directly to the global heads of risk management at institutions like the one Tyler works for. I was the ghost in the machine, the quiet voice that prevented a total market collapse 3 years ago while my sister was busy choosing the correct shade of eggshell for her business cards. I remember one specific night. My father, John, was on the verge of losing everything. A major breach at his construction firm had leaked the private banking details of his most high-profile clients. He was $40 million away from total liquidation and a prison sentence. He came to my room, not to apologize for calling me a mouse at dinner, but because he needed his techie daughter to fix a glitch. I spent 72 hours straight in a darkened room, tracing the exploit back to a server in Eastern Europe and building a temporary firewall that saved his legacy. He didn't thank me, he didn't ask if I'd slept, he just told me to make sure the Wi-Fi worked for his poker game the next night. This is the trap of cruel normalization. In my family, my labor was never seen as an achievement, it was seen as a duty. They had conditioned themselves to believe that my silence was a sign of satisfaction, and my usefulness was simply a return on their investment of raising me. Psychologically, they had turned me into a utility, like electricity or water. You don't thank the faucet for the water, you only complain when it stops running. By reducing me to a mouse, they could ignore the Valkyrie without ever feeling the weight of their own inadequacy. They normalized the exploitation until the tarnish on their souls looked like a polished family portrait. Every science fair trophy they threw in the trash, every academic scholarship they dismissed because it wasn't a prom queen victory, it was all part of the ledger. They thought they could keep drawing from my well forever without ever making a deposit. They were shocked not by what they had done, but by the fact that I had finally stopped playing along. My compassion had been a luxury they'd overdraft for years, and tonight, the interest rate just went up. Looking at Emily now, as she screams at a waiter about her defective card, I feel a sense of clinical detachment. This isn't a family drama, it's a foreclosure. I'm not the victim anymore. I am the auditor, and the audit of the John and Amanda family legacy has just begun. I adjusted my glasses and felt the weight of my black key card in my pocket, the only tool I needed to dismantle the kingdom they built on my back. Emily didn't just break, she weaponized her panic. As a professional PR manager for the elite, she knew that the best defense was a coordinated smear campaign. Standing in the center of the villa's limestone courtyard, surrounded by global influencers and investment bankers, she pointed a shaking finger at me. Victoria has lost it, she announced, her voice projected with practiced authority. She's been bitter for years because she couldn't match our success, and now she's hacked our accounts. She's trying to extort us for $1 million to let this wedding proceed. The guests shifted, whispers of a sociopath and an unstable drifting through the Mediterranean air like toxic ash. Emily was attempting to frame my defensive reset as a criminal offense, trying to destroy my reputation before I could expose their fraud. My mother, Amanda, approached me with a face twisted by social shame. For her, the worst sin wasn't theft, it was the public embarrassment of a declined credit card. How could you be so cruel, she hissed, her hand striking my cheek with a sharp, echoing crack. The sting was temporary, but the liability was permanent. I didn't flinch, I didn't cover my face. I simply looked at her with the cold clarity of a forensic auditor. That slap just cost you the last of my protection, I said, my voice barely a whisper. The Valkyrie is no longer on your side. I reached into my pocket and tapped a sequence on my encrypted mobile device, signaling my executive security detail and the lead counsel for the global payment gateway. I didn't need to shout to be heard. I had an entire infrastructure of international law waiting for my command. Protocol Level 1 was now active. I walked past my stunned parents and Emily toward the villa's grand entrance. Minutes later, the manufactured joy of the wedding was interrupted by the sound of heavy footsteps on stone. A team of 6 men in dark, sharp suits entered the courtyard, followed by 3 high-ranking Italian authorities. They didn't look like local police. They moved with the lethal precision of high-stakes federal investigators. The lead attorney, a man I'd worked with to freeze the assets of corrupt dictators, stepped forward. He didn't look at the bride, he didn't look at the groom, he looked at me and nodded. Ma'am, the injunctions have been served, he said, handing a thick folder of documents to my father. John's face went from red to a sickly, pale gray as he read the first page. It wasn't an invitation, it was a total asset freeze and an order for immediate audit of his construction firm. Every contract Emily had signed for her PR agency was being flagged for review. The Mouse had just put their entire world into receivership. This isn't family business anymore, I said, looking Emily directly in her tear-filled eyes. This is a criminal investigation. I hope your PR skills can handle a federal indictment. The legal team didn't just come to freeze accounts, they came with the results of a high-priority forensic audit I had quietly initiated weeks ago. While the guests whispered about Emily's accusations, the lead attorney opened a slim, black digital tablet and turned it toward my father. "We've been tracing the movement of $1,500,000, he stated, his voice as sharp as a scalpel. John's eyes darted to the screen, and for the first time, I saw real, unadulterated terror. They hadn't just used their construction firm's profits to fund this Amalfi spectacle. The audit revealed a much darker transaction. They had accessed a restricted trust fund that my biological mother had established for me before she passed away. For 22 years, they told me that money didn't exist. They told me I had to work 3 jobs to pay for my own education because there were no resources for this house. The reality was that John and Emily had been treating my inheritance like a private piggy bank, but they hadn't just mismanaged the funds. The digital ledger showed a signature authorization from 18 months ago. It was a perfect replica of my biological mother's handwriting, authorizing a full withdrawal of the $1,500,000 to pay the final deposits for this very villa and the custom designer gowns. The digital forensics team had run a pixel-by-pixel comparison. The signature was a forged composite, created using a high-resolution scan of my mother's old medical records. My father had spent 40 years selling insurance, but he'd spent the last year becoming a criminal. Emily wasn't just a PR manager, she was the one who had coordinated the digital paperwork to make the theft look legitimate. They hadn't just been cruel, they were thieves who had stolen from a child who had lost everything. "This is the kill shot," I said, my voice clinical and devoid of any sisterly warmth. "You didn't just ignore me, you robbed me to pay for a life you couldn't afford on your own." John's knees buckled. Emily tried to speak, but her practiced PR voice was gone, replaced by a strangled gasp of realization. "In my world, we don't call this a family dispute, we call it grand larceny and identity fraud." They had finally run out of variables to manipulate. The audit was complete, the evidence was irrefutable, and the price for their 28 years of normalized cruelty was now due in full. I stared at the numbers on the screen, $1,500,000 of stolen time and betrayal, and I felt a profound sense of accounting. This wasn't a family anymore. It was a closed case file. The silence that followed the chairman's salute was absolute, a heavy, airless vacuum that swallowed the sound of the Amalfi waves. William, the man my father had fetishized as the ultimate icon of power, stood beside me. His immaculate posture a direct indictment of the people who had spent my life trying to make me small. He didn't look at Tyler, his own son, he didn't look at Emily, he addressed the room of billionaires and power players with the gravity of a commander delivering a wartime briefing. He revealed that 48 hours ago, the International Banking Union had been targeted by a sophisticated state-sponsored hack designed to liquidate global trust accounts. He told them the breach would have been a catastrophic, market-ending event if not for the intervention of a specialist known only as Valkyrie. Then, he looked directly at my father. "John, you spent the entire weekend bragging to me about your family legacy," William said, his voice resonant and clear, "but your construction firm would have been a crater 48 hours ago if your daughter hadn't built a firewall around your incompetence. You didn't just ignore a genius, you tried to bury the woman who holds the keys to the system you're so desperate to join." The guests, who minutes ago were laughing at Emily's and Mouse's jokes, now backed away from my family as if they were contagious. I watched the social vacuum form around them in real time. This is the illusion of power from an empty wallet. My family had spent their lives believing that status was a costume they could put on, a facade built on stolen capital and performance. They didn't understand the difference between having and being. Their entire social identity was a lease, paid for with my stolen inheritance. When the funds were frozen and the forensic audit went public, their authority evaporated because it had no internal foundation. They were hollow shells, and without my money to prop them up, they were nothing more than shivering strangers in expensive clothes. John fell to his knees on the limestone floor. The insurance salesman who fetishized military honor was gone, replaced by a man who couldn't even look me in the eye. "Victoria, please," he sobbed, his hands trembling as he reached for the hem of my gray technician uniform. "We're your parents. We made a mistake. Think of Emily, you can't let them take us, we're family." Emily was right beside him, her wedding dress dragging through the dust of the courtyard. The PR mask finally shattered. "I'll do anything, Victoria, I'll make it right. Just tell the lawyers it was a misunderstanding. Don't let this be my wedding legacy." I looked down at them with a clinical detachment that they had taught me through 28 years of indifference. My compassion had been a resource they had overdrafted for nearly 3 decades, and the account was now closed. This wasn't a family dispute, it was a formal correction. I pulled the final injunction from the pocket of my jumpsuit, the order for immediate restitution of $1,500,000 plus interest. I gave you 28 years to be a family, I said. My voice as cold as the server rooms I lived in, but you chose to be criminals. You didn't choose a daughter, you chose an ATM, and the machine just ate your card. I signaled the Italian authorities. As they stepped forward to escort John and Emily away, I didn't feel anger. I felt a profound sense of accounting. The audit of the John and Amanda family legacy was officially closed. The Amalfi breeze felt different as the sun began to set, no longer thick with the scent of stolen lilies and manufactured pride. The villa was now silent, the elite guests had scattered, and the only sound left was the rhythmic pulse of the ocean below. I stood on the high cliff overlooking the Mediterranean and felt a profound sense of peace. The $1,500,000 I had recovered from the restitution order had been wired to a secure account. It wasn't money for a wedding, it was capital for a future. I had already filed the paperwork to establish the Valkyrie Foundation, a specialized fund providing cybersecurity training and legal protection for children who have been overlooked or exploited by the very systems that were supposed to protect them. I opened my contact list for the last time. John, Amanda, Emily. For years, these names were a weight in my chest, a recurring bill for love that never arrived. I hit the final button, delete, delete, delete. I blocked their numbers irrevocably. I didn't feel a pang of guilt or a flicker of regret. I simply felt an old, heavy door closing for good. They weren't shocked by what they had done to me, they were only shocked that I had stopped playing along. In my world, we call this the resolution, the point where the system returns to a state of balance. The insurance salesman and the PR manager had tried to lease a legacy using my life as collateral, but the audit had been lethal. John and Emily were now facing federal indictments for grand larceny and identity fraud. Their reputation, the only currency they truly valued, was now worth zero. This is for those of you who have always felt like the invisible one at the table, to the people who have been called of mice, because you choose to master your craft in the shadows rather than perform for a crowd. You don't need to shout to prove you exist. Your silence isn't a sign of submission. It's the quiet power of a Valkyrie waiting for the right moment to act. You are not a footnote in someone else's story. You are the author of a universe they can't even comprehend. Stop trying to find your worth in the ledger of people who are spiritually bankrupt. Your value doesn't live in their approval, it lives in the rooms of competence you build for yourself, in the clarity of your thinking, and in the quiet respect of people who know what true rank looks like. The best revenge isn't the destruction of your enemies, it's becoming so free that they no longer have a place in your memory. I closed my laptop and watched the last sliver of the sun disappear. Inside, a different kind of sunrise was beginning, one made of truth, independence, and the quiet joy of a life finally reclaimed. I was no longer the mouse, I was simply Victoria, and I was exactly where I belonged. Justice has been served, but this story is more than just about a reckoning, it's about the courage to find yourself. If you saw a part of your own journey in Victoria's, hit that like button and share this video to remind others that their quiet work matters. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of justice and empowerment. Thank you for being a part of our community today.